going on, wrestling fans? Today it is Friday, August 27th, 2021. And if you are currently watching, welcome aboard. This is the Five Starr Wrestling Report podcast. It is a show where each Friday and Monday we bring you show recaps for WWE, NXT, AEW, NWA, whatever's currently on the market. Before we get into the show this week, I want to take a minute to do some brief plugs. If you're tuning in for the first time, make sure you hit the subscribe button, smash the like button on the video here, and most importantly, leave a comment down below for me. Whatever's on your mind, I would be happy to hear from you. We have 2 uploads each week here on the FSWR channel. We have a Friday edition where we cover AEW Dynamite and NXT TV, and Monday's edition where we cover NWA Power and AEW Rampage, as well as any weekend wrestling events or pay-per-views. So that show will definitely fluctuate from week to week depending on how heavy things are content-wise on Saturdays and Sundays. In addition to watching the show here on YouTube, you can also find my content on Rumble, which will be my secondary platform where I basically do duplicate posts. So if you don't want to watch the podcast on my YouTube channel here, you could also support me over at Rumble. So I will leave the link down below for that. Also, I had mentioned this in my previous Monday show. If you have not checked that out already, make sure you go back so you can hear my thoughts on the CM Punk debut on Rampage for AEW, SummerSlam, and TakeOver from this past weekend. It was quite the eventful weekend in pro wrestling. But in addition to the podcasting that I'll be doing here, I will also be writing article pieces for the Chairshot website. I'll be covering 4 topics each week. Articles will be posted Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays. Most of the content that I'll be writing will be opinion-based pieces, but, there may be occasional news coverage or content coverage depending on what comes up. In addition, I am currently trying to work things out right now so that I can eventually get this podcast onto the Chairshot platform as well, just to grab some additional eyeballs over to that channel and try to grow this YouTube channel. You know how the way things are with YouTube now. It's a very difficult platform these days to really build an audience from scratch. So I know I'm jumping into this in a very awkward period of time, but hey, I'm certainly not going to give up trying. So, once I can get that ball rolling over there, I will keep posted on how you can view that on the Chairshot website as well. Most likely or not, I'll just end up leaving links like I do for the Rumble. But it'll most likely be audio format, which is really no different from what I'm currently doing now. Although I have mentioned in the past that if there is a preference at some point down the road for me to include some kind of screen capture during the podcast, I would not be opposed to doing it. I could probably figure out how to make that work, but right now this format seems to be working best, so I'm just going to stick with it until, I get a little more recognition. Plus, I don't know why you'd want to see my hideous face anyway. Regardless, I think that is it here. Got my plugs out of the way, so alrighty, on to the content. This week, on the Friday edition, we have NXT from August 24th, 2021, and AEW Dynamite from August 25th, 2021. So we'll, as usual, kick off with NXT from Tuesday. Show begins with Cameron Grimes and Ted DiBiase coming out for a championship celebration. They had a nice little father-son talk. Probably the best way I can describe it. They actually did a good job explaining a major plot hole with this whole Grimes-DiBiase feud from when it first started. Because if y'all remember, this whole thing began with Grimes feuding with Ted. Remember he kept calling him out every week on TV? And it was only when they threw LA Knight into the program and had him jump Ted where they sort of inexplicably turned Grimes babyface. So here, Grimes was basically like, I'll be honest, Ted, when we first met, I couldn't stand you. But over time, I started to realize you're not such a bad guy. Talked about losing the plot along the way. Said he got so caught up in the money and counting the zeros in his bank account, but he had nothing to back him up in the ring. But now that he's the $1 million champ, he's able to prove that he's worth something. Keep that in mind for later, by the way. So, long story short, he asks where he goes from there, and Ted tells him that they're going where? You guessed it. I have a feeling I'm going to be using that drop more often than not. Well, it wasn't much of a plot development promo, but it was entertaining. Like I said, though, there was more to this later on in the program, and it's quite baffling, to say the least. But we'll get to that. Ridge Holland with Towhead versus Timothy Thatcher. For the record, Towhead is Pete Dunne, if you needed clarification on that. Oh yeah, and Ciampa was out there too. And if you had told me that you forgot that guy existed, I wouldn't blame you. Anyway, match was alright. Thatcher has a real ground-based ring style, so, unless he's working with guys that wrestle similarly to him, it can sometimes feel like a styles clash, but I thought Holland did fine in there. Holland ended up going over with the Northern Grit. I think that's what it's called. It's basically a scoop power slam, but he drops the guy in the back of his neck. The Afterbirth deal was a little much for my taste. We had a Ciampa and Holland brawl. Then Oney Lorcan and Danny Burch did a run-in. Oh yeah, Danny Burch is back, everyone. Kind of an important footnote there. Then Pete Dunne got involved with Ciampa. Then Holland laid out Ciampa. Then Thatcher pulled out Holland. Holland hit him with his gimmick. Then Dunne got involved. Then Holland took a throat shot at Thatcher. And if I didn't know any better, I'd figure Russo was booking this shit. We'll see where it goes. I presume this is all to set up the War Games show, which I have no idea when that would take place. Last year it was in December, right? We're in August now. I highly doubt they're going to be stretching this over a 4-month gap, but another wait and see kind of thing, I guess. We had Casey Catanzaro and Kaden Carter versus Tampon Girl and the other partner. Well, actually, no, before that, we had a skit with Dexter Lumis and Indy Hartwell. They're getting married! How exciting. Brace yourself, people. It's not like wedding angles have ever gone according to plan in pro wrestling. Well, no, that's not fair. You can go back to SummerSlam 1991. Anyway, I guess we need to talk about this women's tag match. Well, Casey's 450 splash at the end was cool. That's about all I have to say. Casey's awesome. I wish they would do more with her as a singles act. If they spent time building her up, they could easily make her a real underdog challenger for Raquel down the road. That would also imply that Raquel would be the heel, and for some reason, they keep insisting on booking her as a face. Oh, and apparently Casey and Kaden won a tag title shot. Yeah. Because those belts still exist. Speaking of Raquel, she did a promo. Talked about her match with Dakota at the pay-per-view. Talked about Kaylee Ray for a minute. And this brought in Frankie Monet and her crew to, I don't know, I guess tease a program. I didn't watch a lot of Frankie's stuff in Impact. I know people used to rave about how great she was there. So far, I have not been all that impressed with her run, but, that could also be the fact that they really haven't done much with her yet. So I guess we'll have to see where they go with her. But, I mean, she's been in NXT for a hot minute, and I don't really think she's had any major programs yet. So it's kind of weird that they would thrust her directly into the title picture, but hey, it's something. And on the brief subject of Kaylee Ray, she squashed a chick in a few minutes. Man, there are a lot of Rays and Ray names out there that I need to keep track of now. What do we got? Kaylee Ray. We've got Candice LeRae. We've got What's the girl's name that wrestled in like 8 different companies and retires every 2 weeks? Why can't I think of her? She wrestled in an AEW for a minute. What was it? Kelly Ray, Kylie Ray, something like that. Oh, God. Too many Rays to keep track of. Thank God Summer Rae's not around anymore. Otherwise, I think my head would explode. Anyway, we had like the 4th or 5th women's segment in a row now. Jesus Christ. I felt like I was watching Shimmer or something. Wasn't much. Gigi and the other girl, I think her name's JC, they got recruited, I guess, by Mandy Rose. So now I think we're up to 27 factions in NXT. And I thought AEW was bad. So finally the show picked up. Samoa Joe came out. The new NXT champion, by the way, people, doesn't actually make a physical appearance until about 45 minutes into the program. Anyway, he essentially called out any and all that want to fight him. So Pete Dunne evidently answers Joe's little challenge. They were about to fight when LA Knight came out to talk. And pretty soon Kyle O'Reilly came out to talk. Who she hadn't. That's all I'm saying. This did have a lot of Monday Night Raw elements to it where, every dude got to come out and say their lines. Everyone kind of filed in one by one with their entrance music and felt very choreographed. So it ended up with another chaotic brawl deal. Holland came out and laid out O'Reilly. Joe and Dunn almost got into a fight, and Ciampa came in to jump Dunn. Joe laid out Knight, and by the end of this, I had no idea what was being set up, who was feuding with whom, or why I should care. So in essence, this started off good with the Joe Dunn confrontation and then quickly petered off into a muddled mess. Then we had the segment. So Grimes and DiBiase are about to leave. I presume together. So DiBiase gets in the back of a limo, and Grimes just arbitrarily decides, you know what? I don't want to be the $1 Million Champion anymore. Why? No idea. Just roll with it. So he gives Ted the belt, and as he's walking away, Ted calls him back and tells him that he's the rightful champion and that he wants him to keep it. So, of course, Grimes is all ecstatic. He's, talking about how much this means to him, blah, blah, blah. But then he starts to realize that the title doesn't feel authentic. So, of course, he flips it over, and it reads, Official Shop Replica Belt. He was swerved. So the limo drives off, and Ted lets out the $1 million laugh. And, of course, Grimes isn't angry. He's not fuming. He's not saddened. Nope, he just goes, that damn Ted DiBiase. And he shrugs it off like, oh well, guess my championship's gone forever now. Okay, a couple questions. Number one, if Grimes was just going to give Ted the belt back, why did they waste 3 takeover matches wherein the objective was for Grimes to win the championship? I know they never officially recognized the $1 Million title as one of their main titles on the brand, but it would seem practical that if they dedicated months to a story of him wrestling for the title, they'd maybe want to, ride that story instead of inexplicably dropping it 3 days after he won it for reasons. Number two, why did Grimes give the belt back to begin with? He said that until he won the $1 million title, all the wealth he had accumulated was meaningless because he wasn't fighting for anything. Well, now he was fighting for something, and then he gave it up freely because reasons. Number three, is that really how we're blowing off this storyline? Just Grimes overcomes the odds, wins the title, gains Ted's respect, and then immediately gives the belt back and is made to look like a jackass? What a great fucking babyface that guy turned out to be. Couldn't have done a better job making him look like a dweeb. Like, I get the whole gist of it. It was to, circle back on the initial story of Ted foiling Grimes and making him look like an idiot. But again, this might have made more sense in context if they didn't spend the last 2 months giving us reasons to cheer Cameron Grimes. If he was the heel all along, then fine. At least you could make the argument that he won the title, acted all pompous, gave the belt back thinking that Ted was going to let him keep it, and then Grimes looks like a dumbass when Ted swaps the belts. Yeah, this was dumb. I'm sorry. We had Duke Hudson and Kyle O'Reilly get into a fight. Why? I don't know. Carmelo Hayes and Odyssey Jones in the breakout tournament finals. They had a solid big guy, little guy match. Wasn't much else to it. All signs were pointing to them putting Jones over in the tournament. He was clearly the most over, had the most support, looked the most impressive, and, well, I guess to swerve us, they had Hayes roll over Jones with a crucifix and score the upset pin. Yeah. Wrong guy won. That's all I'll say about it. But, I said the same thing 2 years ago, and it ultimately didn't make a lick of difference. And apparently this was not the main event either, because I looked at my clock and realized that there was still another 30 minutes left in the show. So what do they follow this up with? Boa versus some dude named Zion Quinn. They wrestle for a couple minutes. Boa is distracted by his own manager, who, by the way, was doing nothing out of the ordinary thing she usually does, fucking sitting, and then Quinn won. I got nothing. We had Johnny Gargano and LA Knight screaming in each other's faces in Regal's office. That was a lot of fun. We had Roderick Strong doing some training in a dojo with Malcolm Bivens cutting a promo. The only thing of note being the question of whether or not Roddy's contemplating his life right now and wishing he could wrestle in another company. And in the actual main event, Hit Row versus Legado del Fantasma in a 6-man. It was an all-action match, a lot of moves. Top Doll is the fucking man. I will say, watching big dudes carry around 2 or 3 grown men on their shoulders will never not be awesome. Anyway, this finish. Let's talk about this finish for a minute. So, Swerve hits a 450 on Escobar for a near fall. Keep in mind, they did this same exact move like less than an hour earlier, and it was the finish to a wrestling match. Here it was a transitional move, but we'll skip past that. So Escobar kicks out of the 450. He rolls to the outside, and B-Fab shoves him into the post. And as she's standing there, we get a woman appearing behind her. And they take like 30 whole seconds before revealing that this is Elektra Lopez. Who? So she pulls out a pipe and wails B-Fab in the ribs. She tosses the pipe to Swerve in the ring. He catches it and immediately gets into an argument with the ref over God knows what. I guess the ref thought he was planning to use this weapon to his advantage, even though we clearly saw Lopez throw it at him. So anyway, they did this stupid spot so that Escobar could just slide in and roll him up for the 3. And we did get the line from Wade Barrett at the end of the show where he goes, "Well, it's all clear now." And my final notes for the show read, "No, Wade. No, it's not." In fact, this was so unclear, even if I tried to make sense of it, I would probably have to put more thought into it than what is really warranted at this current moment in time. Yeah, so that was the thing. I could not tell you what was going on in this final segment. I presume this is all to set up a mixed tag down the road, to which my question coming out of it is, when are we exactly supposed to get Swerve and Escobar for the North American title? I had thought that the 6-man was done to further that program, but by the end of it, the goal seemed to be designed to set up a potential singles match with BFAB at some point, which would be like the 8th or 9th women's program that they've got going on in NXT right now. And I have never seen a BFAB wrestling match before, so God only knows what horrors await me there. This was very confusing. Well, I'll say this about NXT. I can definitely see some of these early seeds that they're planning for where they want to take the show creatively. They're slowly implementing a lot of new faces. Most of them are really green and not all that good. Most of them are purely Performance Center originals and have little to no indie experience. Again, it's still too early to judge how this whole format change is going to affect the quality of the product, but man, if I were USA right now, I'd keep my finger on the pulse, because this show's already not doing hot in the numbers each week, and if more and more people drop off in the coming months, the show's going to have some serious problems to attend to. Anyway, moving along here to Dynamite the following night. I was cautiously optimistic. They were coming off the high of the CM Punk debut on Rampage. I had watched NXT the previous day and was, well, less than impressed, to say the very least. So it was just hoping that this would be a solid 2-hour wrestling program. Keyword was hope. God damn it. Orange Cassidy versus Matt Hardy in the opener. Well, you can't win them all. I tried. I gave it a shot. And got about 3 seconds in, Hardy and Cassidy started doing stupid comedy with the shin kicks and the delete sign, and I went to take a dump. Unfortunately, I came back and they were still wrestling. Somehow Hardy got busted open. No idea how. Cassidy won with a roll-up. I think I fell asleep. Chris Jericho came out for a promo and started running down the whole Labor Series deal, talked about tapping to MJF last week and how embarrassing it was for him, blah, blah, blah. By the way, I never mentioned this, mostly because I don't care. Has the MJF Chris Jericho Labor Series deal been the worst booked story of 2021? Maybe that's an exaggeration. I'm sure there's been far worse stuff on WWE programming, but if there is, it doesn't track too far behind this deal. I mean, never mind the fact that Jericho basically came out here none the worse for wear. I mean, that's not shocking because he pretty much no-sold the effects of every Labor match from start to finish, including the week after he worked a fucking death match. But his whole premise here is, I needed to beat MJF and I failed. But notice how he never mentions, I needed to beat MJF and I failed because I never stood a fair chance to begin with. Because this fucking little twerp derived this convoluted scheme so that in order for me to get a match with him, I basically had to run a little gauntlet series, burn myself out entirely, and then by the time I got to actually face the douchebag in a match, I was never going to be at 100% anyway. So, is his solution to issue a fair match with MJF at All Out? Is his solution now that I've played your little psychological warfare, we're going to play my warfare game now. At All Out, it's going to be MJF versus Chris Jericho, one-on-one, no gimmicks, no bells and whistles, no bullshit. Well, the answer, no, of course. That was not the solution. No, rather, Jericho's solution is to issue a challenge to MJF at All Out, wherein for no reason at all, when he does not have to, he will put his career on the line. And if he loses, he will never wrestle again. Presumably so that he can join the commentary team full time. Now, I guess you can make a fair argument that, I don't know, maybe if Jericho had initially demanded the fair singles match, MJF comes out and says no, and then Jericho puts his career on the line as like an ultimatum. Okay, I'll buy that. But he didn't do that here. No, he just said, I want MJF at All Out, and I'll put my career on the line too. And then MJF goes, all right, dumbass, if that's what you want. So suffice it to say, I have not been a particular fan of this MJF Jericho program. And that sucks because MJF's a tremendous talent. And ideally, a feud between him and Jericho should pretty much book itself. But they just got way too cute with this along the way. And it really ended up being a hindrance to the program. I mean, not to mention they've been feuding for like what feels like an eternity now. And after going through a War Games match and the Stadium Stampede debacle, now they're finally going to culminate this feud with a one-on-one match between the two on pay-per-view. Yeah, I don't get it. Lucha Bros versus the Varsity Blondes in a tag team championship tournament eliminator semifinals. That was a mouthful. Match was fine for what it was. I like the Pillman-Garrison duo. They've got a territorial element to their team, which I kind of dig. Obviously, though, I think everyone pretty much knew that Pentagon and Phoenix were going to go over here, and that's cool. The juvenile schoolgirls were out there at the top of the stage watching. That's the Bucks and the bald-headed buffoons, for those of you wondering. And after the Lucha Bros won, the Elite tried to run in, but they got cut off by Phoenix, Pentagon, and the Jurassic Express. Segment was fine. I still think they should give the nod to Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus and have them win the titles in the cage match against the Bucks on pay-per-view, but we'll see what they do this Friday. I know the spoilers are out for that show, and I have not read them. Not that I would be gravely offended if I did see them in advance, because I could really care less about who goes over in this program, but I'm just trying to avoid it for the sake of entertainment factors, I guess. I don't know. We had an inset promo with Andrade and Chavo hyping up his match with Pac. Andrade unfortunately spoke here, and I do not know who gave him permission to talk, but I wish they hadn't. Seriously, guys, there's a reason that Chavo's there. WWE used to do this shit with him, too. Like, he was with Zelina Vega in NXT, and Selena would do, 90% of the promo, but for some reason, they felt that they needed to have Andrade get in, a line or two, and it always sucked every time. Just don't let him speak, guys. He's not good at it. Jamie Hayter versus Red Velvet. Hayter won with a lariat. I literally wrote nothing else down here. Although they do get point deduction for another classic example of blatant interference in front of the ref, yet there's not a call for a DQ. I guess we're operating under the TNA Impact mantra, where DQs only count when they want them to. Whatever, not my show. Anyway, they tried to beat up Velvet after the bell, but Chris Statler ran out and made the save. Apparently she's wrestling Britt for the title at the pay-per-view. Great. By the way, JR had mentioned something about Statlander being undefeated in AEW. I had no idea what the fuck he was talking about. Unless he was specifically talking about just in the year 2021, which in that case I'd have to go check on that. But I've definitely seen Chris Statlander do a handful of jobs in AEW since I started watching. Anyway, you know what? I wrote something else in my notes here, but I don't even feel if it's worth the discussion right now. Maybe I'll save it for a later date. I mean, here's my little teaser if you want something to stew your mind on for a couple days. I've seen a lot of women's wrestling lately. And long story short, some of it's been passable, most of it's been really bad. And I'm not just talking about AEW, this goes for NXT too. I'm not going to try and sit here and stake a claim that I would prefer to see less women's wrestling. All I'm saying that is if you're going to do it, you should at least know that they're going to be held to a certain standard. And, you know, especially in a time where we get the women empowerment agenda shoved down our throats, and, you know, women want to be treated and valued on a similar playing field as the men in the work industry. Look, we can have that debate if you'd like. You know, as much as I disagree with how we've gone about dealing with this conversation as a culture, particularly in the sports realm, if the women want to be seen and judged as equals to the men in pro wrestling, we can go down that rabbit hole if you want. You're just going to have to need to be willing to accept the harsh criticism from fans if you expect an audience of a predominantly male fan base to be viewing and critiquing your work. Because I can assure you one thing after watching this program. There weren't a lot of people out there that spoke highly of this Red Velvet Jamie Hayter match. Even the hardest of the hardcore AEW fans weren't going out of their way to defend this. In fact, the women's division has been one of the most highly criticized things about AEW since its inception. Look, it's cool if you want to do a women's division. It's cool if you want to feature women's wrestling on your programming. Have at it. But you need good talent. You need a highly skilled collection of talent that can carry a division in high-level competition reliably, of whom names include more than just Thunder Rosa and Serena Deeb. And, look, I know this is a real touchy subject for a lot of people out there, especially people that don't like controversy. I, for one, don't give a shit, so I'll just say whatever I want. But I also want to be practical and reasonable when talking about the subject, because this is a real hot-button issue in our culture today, not just in terms of a sports landscape, but a political landscape, an occupational landscape. For some reason now this has become a scientific debate. Just, there's a lot of issues with the male-female dynamic in normal day conversation. Just something to think about. We had some tension teasing with the job order. Fuck it, great. Sooner they ditch that stupid act, the better. Should have died when it debuted 2 years ago. God, this first hour sucked. Thankfully, it did pick up a little bit with the Punk Shivani interview. So, well, first I think it should be noted. I don't know this for sure. I'm positive that someone who actually attended live would say differently. I thought Punk's reaction on this show was weak. It sounded like he got a popcorn fart out there from this Milwaukee crowd. Maybe they weren't mic'd well. Maybe the crowd figured not much was going to happen here. Maybe the AEW flavor of the month has already soured. I don't know. But comparing and contrasting Punk from Friday night to 5 days later, yeah, this reaction was pretty bad. Anyway, Punk and Shivani bantered around for a few minutes, but Tony mainly asked why he came back. And Punk names off a bunch of guys he wants to wrestle at some point, but right now his focus is on Darby Allin at All Out. He says Darby reminds him of someone Punk would have been a huge fan of at 15. He says he's not the biggest guy or the strongest guy, but he's got heart. He alluded to Bryan Danielson a couple times, and fans started a yes chant, and Punk essentially said, "You'll have to wait a little bit longer for that." Again, not even trying to conceal anything at this point, and honestly, why even bother? The cat's already out of the bag. And, well, he also blew his wife a kiss. And if there's a God, hopefully we do not see her on AEW TV anytime soon. This segment wasn't much, but I'll tell you what, Punk sure remembers how to sell people on a pay-per-view match. Like I said before, I'm not even a Darby Allin fan, but if you ask me point blank which match I'm looking forward to at the pay-per-view right now, top of the list, it's Allin versus Punk. So, good on him for selling me on it. Miro did a skit challenging Eddie Kingston to a TNT title match. Why? I have no idea. Darby Allin, Jon Moxley, and Eddie Kingston squashed whatever this trio was called, the Wingmen? I don't know. Caesar Bononi? I know he wrestled in NXT for a minute. Never did anything productive with him to my recollection. Ryan Nemeth is the brother of Dolph Ziggler, so that's all you need to know about that guy. And I know nothing about this JD Drake fella. I honestly thought he was the dude working the ticket booth in the parking garage and got lost or something. Maybe he was looking for a donut refill or something. I have nothing else to say about this. The whole thing was a formality from the get-go, so I have no fucking clue why this went through a commercial. I did know that during the Afterbirth angle, and yes, of course there was an Afterbirth angle. Why wouldn't there be? I did note Daniel Garcia getting punked out by Bryce Remsburg, of all people. And if you need clarification on what I'm referring to, just rewatch the segment. You'll know what I'm talking about. Anyway, what do we have next? Jesus Christ, this show sucked. What the hell was I talking about when I said only the first hour sucked? This whole show was garbage this week. And it just kept rolling along with this Elite Christian Cage segment. So first, Callis is in the ring cutting a promo on Christian. And Christian comes out to the stage and he plays a video of something. I rewatched this like several times over because I was genuinely confused as to what the hell I was supposed to think. I think the idea was that Callis had hired Christian somewhere and then fired him somewhere. And before I even had any time to digest what the fuck he was talking about, the video was over and they just moved along with the segment. I was like, excuse me? What hiring? What firing? What the hell is going on here? So then Callis started name-dropping Bill Watts, Vern Gagne, and Vince McMahon, and Christian pretty much summed up exactly my thoughts when he goes, I just fell asleep standing up listening to that. Only difference is I was lounged back in a chair when I fell asleep. So yeah, this segment sucked too. All I remember here is that they got into a brawl and Frankie Kazarian ran in with a bat to chase everyone off. And apparently this was to set up Kaz and Cage versus Omega and Brandon Cutler on Rampage. God help us all. Yes, of all the members of the Elite that Omega could choose as a partner, he goes with the clown that hasn't won a match since the fall of the Western Roman Empire. We figured out who Moxley's facing it all out. Apparently he's wrestling Satoshi Kojima. Why? Why not? How about that? Gun Club versus The Factory. 6 dudes I could give 2 fucks less about wrestling a messy tag match that went like 7 or 8 minutes. And, in order to build up the Big Show versus QT Marshall, which you'd think was the whole point of them doing this match to begin with, they had QT get into a jaw-jacking contest with Paul at the commentary booth, and then he gets rolled up and pinned by one of the Guns. Fabulous booking. Dan Lambert ranted. Scorpio Sky and Ethan Page were there. It was dumb. seriously, guys, if you're going to rip off the Jim Cornette gimmick, just fucking hire Jim Cornette. Seriously. And in the main event of the show, Malachi Black versus Brock Anderson. Note to AEW. Not every major wrestling star's son is cut out for the business. Just because they happen to share the same last name does not mean that they need to be pushed. See David Flair. See Garrett Bischoff. See Colton and Austin Gunn. Look, I don't want to demean Brock here. I'm sure he's a nice kid. Maybe in a few years he might be ready for TV. But this was such a waste of a main event. Like, I know his job was to literally go out and do a job for Black here, but you got plenty of undercard guys on the roster that need TV time. Plenty of other guys you could have put in the spot. Dustin Rhodes, for example. What about that Lee Johnson dude? Wasn't he getting a push for a while? Like, I know they had him run out at the end to make the save for Arn, but at least Lee could have a semi-credible match with Malachi. You know, he's at least been established on television for more than 20 seconds. I mean, the angle was fine for what they were trying to do, and that's all it pretty much was, an extended angle. They do the deal after Black wins where Arn gets in the ring to defend his son, but Black kicks his head off, and that's when they had Lee run down. So, what, we're doing Black versus Johnson? Is that going to happen on Dynamite or Rampage? Cannot imagine they're actually going to put that on All Out. I mean, nothing against Lee or anything, but that match sure as shit ain't putting butts in the seats. I figured that if they were going to do the Cody Black rematch, they would have at least had Cody make a comeback by now to set it up, but I don't know, maybe they're not going in that direction. Who knows? It's just a weird main event. And especially by the end, you're sitting there thinking, you know, what is this exactly setting up? Yeah, like, it's cool if the end game here is to maybe do Black versus Dustin Rhodes at All Out. Like, that could be an enjoyable match. But, again, where was Dustin in all this? I don't know. This did not work. I'll be honest, and obviously based on my recap of the show, you probably could tell from the jump, but I was not a fan of either show this week. NXT wasn't terrible. It was just boring. AEW was just all over the map this week. Way too discombobulated. Way too much crap going on. Too much job talent on the show for my liking. And to be honest, you know, all the matches were either bad to average. And, you know, like, especially with them coming off the huge CM Punk thing on Rampage, this whole show just felt like it was coming down from a high or something. I mean, for me, the best match on the show was the Lucha Bros and the Varsity Blondes, and, you know, that wasn't a great match by any stretch. Yeah, this was a letdown. Like I said, I mean, the hype AEW was coming off from this past weekend. This just felt like a huge plunge in terms of quality. I have no idea what happened, but no bueno. Anyway, that'll about do it for this episode. Thanks for watching, folks. Again, if you want to keep posted, make sure you subscribe. Click the bell icon to stay notified of my future uploads. Rate the video here and comment below for me. And stay tuned each Monday and Friday for new uploads on the channel. Episodes drop early to mid-afternoon each day, depending on how the editing process goes. But I've been fairly consistent with getting these up by, noon Eastern time. Anyway, I'll be back on Monday to cover AEW Rampage and the upcoming NWA 73 event. So we'll see how NWA's progress is going since the post-pandemic era. It'll be my first viewing experience since, when was the last NWA show I watched? It might have been a Power episode. I don't remember. It's been a while. So, should be a lot of fun. Apparently Ric Flair's supposed to make an appearance, and God only knows what that man will do. That said, take care, have a great weekend, and I'll see you soon. Peace.